Record to the cloud. All right. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Welcome to the first iteration of our planning breakdown conversations. We have a threat management version of this meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And my hope is that over time, we won't need to have, we can find a way to avoid having a synchronous meeting. But for right now, considering some of the conversations going on around trying to be more accurate and our deliverables and what we can get done in a certain iteration, as well as making sure that we're working with our PMs to try and break down big pieces of work into smaller deliverable slices of technology. We thought that for right now, having a synchronous conversation would be helpful. Going forward, maybe we can find a way to do this asynchronously through issues or other, Slack, other forums, but for right now, this is where we're at. So this meeting is focused on container and app security. I know there's two groups right now that consist of, there's the application infrastructure security and runtime application security, but given the direction that we're going to try and combine these into one group, I figured it made sense to have one meeting for them. Sam is the new PM for that area, so he is going to be crucial to this conversation, and I would hope that Sam, you can help drive as much as possible the discussion around the issues that we're going to be looking at today. We only have a half hour, so for the sake of time, I did send out 3 links to look at today. And Sam, I hope if we can make it through those 3, if that's going to be, it's progress. It may not be all of the issues that you'd like to have discussed for the upcoming release, but I think that's pretty much all we're going to get time for in a half-hour chunk based on feedback on how long this took for other groups. Because I know Secure is playing around with this as well, trying to have these types of discussions earlier on. So, any questions before we get started and jump right into looking at the first issue on the list?
Sounds good to me.
Silence is golden. Thanks, Sam. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and share so we're all on the same page. The top issue that Sam provided of the highest priority issues to look at is WAF configuration toggling. So many fun words in one description. Sam, I'm going to, so since this is the first time we've done this, how I would like to run this, and this is obviously flexible, so that I like, I'd like, if Sam, if you can give us sort of a high level description of the issue so we don't have to read through everything, and then we can jump into questions and suggestions of ways that we can make this smaller, because it already feels like a big story or issue.
Sure. So, really the problem that we're trying to solve here is to make it easier for users to turn WAF off and to change it between logging and blocking mode as needed, especially in light of the recent performance bug that we ran into, and just trying to help ensure that they're able to control when the WAF is being used and when it's not. For any product that's sitting in line in a customer environment that is sitting in front of a production grade application, if we ever introduce a bug or have a problem there, the customer's got to have the flexibility to shut the thing off in a very easy way. So, recognizing that there are ways that they're able to do that today, none of them are entirely optimal. We're trying to make this a lot easier for users to toggle the thing off if it ever goes wrong. The proposal is to put it on the, the operations Kubernetes page. One of the big drivers for that is because we're shipping mod security out to all users all the way down to GitLab core. And I feel strongly that the ability to have this kind of toggle also needs to go all the way down to core. That's something that anybody who's using mod security needs to have. So that being said, without getting into any more of the details, are there any questions or additional comments here? I think we do have a couple designs. They're not on the designs tab, but I think Becca posted them in line in the discussion.
So I think one of the first clarifications I wanted to ask was, is the expectation here that this is a real-time toggle, or this is essentially a configuration option for deployment?
I was anticipating this to be a real-time toggle. Steer me otherwise if that would cause problems, but you know, again, I'm 2 weeks on the job here, but I would expect this would be a real-time toggle. You know, I view the use case as, you know, we discover a latency bug that just showed up 7 days after we turned on WAF, and it's impacting our production environment. I can't crash my whole production environment. I just need to shut off the WAF. Let me go do that right now.
So I think just to set the stage for my question, we don't really have, at least nothing comes to mind in terms of like an actual, like, we don't have any real-time configuration of clusters. Just about every setting and every configuration currently occurs through a pipeline deployment. So correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the call, but I can't think of any use case or if this would be a bit more paradigm shifting than the way that we currently approach these things.
Could you do a config change and then it automatically kicks off the pipeline?
Yeah, like if there's a button or this toggle, you select blocking instead of logging, it could trigger a new deployment pipeline. Like that's definitely one approach we could look at, but I don't think that we have anything currently in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, if it is a big paradigm shift like that, we might want to add, you know, tooltip or some sort of additional warning. You know, we might want to make that clear in the UI in some fashion, you know, whether it's a note or a tooltip or, you know, I'm happy to defer to UX on what that exactly looks like.
And I think the other concern I had was around, we have like a product category of infrastructure as code, and the kind of the direction with GitLab managed apps is more towards using a cluster management project. So you essentially store your Helm configuration in a repo, thereby make it easy to like track configuration changes. And so I think if we wanted to stay in line with that, this would have to, this would be a blocker dependent on, I guess I'll just throw it in here, the Zoom chat, this issue, which is in the backlog of orchestration. But if this is the direction I want to go, I just want to confirm if that was something that we would want to follow.
I need to look at this issue more. I mean, so well, infrastructure as code has a lot of advantages. It's not without its disadvantages in ease of use and speed. You know, I just kind of see being able to turn this thing off as a pretty basic task that as an end user, you know, needing to go implement that in code when I'm just trying to quickly shut it off is a little bit cumbersome for accomplishing that task. I'm looking over that linked issue now. I'm not super familiar with it.
It's maybe less about, perhaps less about how it gets turned off than the time it takes. So if it's, you click the button to turn it off or to turn it on, and it kicks off a deploy, the deploy takes what the deploy takes. You know, it's just throw it there. It's minutes. That may not be as fast as some users may like, but since we're infrastructure as code, that's reasonable in an infrastructure as code world, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the time frame of minutes is okay. I'm more concerned about, you know, somebody goes in there, you know, because we've defaulted WAF to on, and, you know, so they may not have even realized that WAF just got turned on for their environments, and now all of a sudden it's causing a problem. You know, what's the learning curve and ease of use for them to intuitively figure out on their own how to turn the thing off? I mean, if you gave somebody kind of a blind test of this thing and said, you know, here, go figure out how to turn WAF off, and it's the first time they've ever interacted with WAF, if they have to go, whether it's an environmental variable or whether it's logging in and issuing a kubectl command, or, I mean, that's like, they have to realize that it's there. They have to proactively go look up our documentation and figure out how to do it. It's a pretty steep learning curve to go turn it off right now. Whereas if we've got a UI toggle, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I'm not too concerned about the time. If it takes a couple minutes to turn it off, that's acceptable.
So for the sake of the goal of this meeting, and I know this has already been proposed in other forums, is at the very least, it should be broken into two different issues. One reflecting the ability to turn this off on an as needed basis, and the other with that UI, especially considering the constraints that we have on front-end resources right now. Does that make sense, Sam?
So is that something that I would split up, or is that something that engineering would split up?
That's a great question. This is the first one of these planning breakdowns we've done. So what does everybody think? Is that, as we go through these discussions and we identify places where we think that there's logical breaks, I guess I would prefer it to be owned by PM, but what does everyone else think?
I think that if we look from the MVC perspective, the MVC should be the minimum. So I would rather split. I don't mind if it's us or PM. Just my thoughts.
I mean,
on that.
I would rather keep mine focused on the end customer experience, which would involve both the back end and the front end, because if you just do one of the pieces, the customer's not going to get the value. And then kind of let engineering break that down. I know we don't have subtasks on issues yet. And there's been talk about how to work around that with GitLab, but ideally I would see myself owning this and then you guys breaking it down to sub issues as needed.
Is there value of delivering the back end work for this ahead of the front end by providing the configuration driven solution ahead of the UI?
So I was been trying to think about what that would look like, and what that essentially would look like is you could trigger a pipeline with maybe an environment variable or an option to trigger this that would get processed by the backend or via API. That pretty much exists now using some conglomeration of configurations options into a pipeline. So I would almost say that we have the backend portion, and that's why it gets really tricky on how we break this down more. I guess we could make it easier on the backend to do that.
It sounds like we already have the ability to support this through configurations, that the work really is rooted in creating a solution that's easier, that based on Sam's description is a front-end toggle. So it doesn't answer the question of who would create that ticket, but it sounds like maybe that ticket shouldn't be created and that this should represent the front-end work.
Yeah, well, I guess one thing that just came to mind though when you were saying that was we need some kind of stateful tracking of this. Currently, we do not track like the current state of the active application. And so if we have a toggle here that's going to actually say blocking mode is on, we need to know where we're getting that information. And is that a live query to the cluster that we're caching somewhere? Or does that mean that we're actually we're actually storing a stateful copy of the state of the cluster within the GitLab application itself? And that would definitely require more complex backend work. So
one nice side effect, maybe that we can track how many customers have it off or on in a nice, easy way, so we can track adoption metrics as well. That is not in scope for this, but if we can keep that in mind for this, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Lucas, sorry, jumping in, not on my stuff, but what you said about making it easier on the configuration perspective, is that from a code perspective and wiring it up to the front end, or is that actually making it easier for an end user to do the configuration that we're talking about?
That's a good question. So going back to that one, the infrastructure as code managed issue, I guess in an ideal world, the way that we would imagine that ending up is through this UI, you set block that commits it internally to a repo. So it keeps the repo up to date with the UI through the sync, which is exactly how our wiki works, by the way. Our wiki product is backed by a Git repo. And then on that commit, it triggers a deploy of the pipeline, pushes it out, everything works. So that would be like the complete full cycle of that working, both tracking it through an infrastructure as codeway, providing UI, and then allowing it to be synced. I just don't know. I think that that's optimistic in terms of everything we need to get in place for that to occur. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way is between here and there to get there. Because maybe internally it's all bash scripts doing something, but
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked was if what is there today is it's possible, but not extremely user-friendly or not the way we would like to do it as the infrastructure as code from a configuration perspective. I guess, Sam, I would see that as potentially a place where you could cut that off as sort of MVC1 is let's redo the non-UI driven portion of it, make it easier and more, maybe clear through documentation how to do this. Setting the groundwork for then wiring it up for a UI is a separate one. Because I think, Lindsay, the way that I've seen it done here, and my sort of general opinion on this, if something cannot be broken down into a smaller unit of customer value, if there's a split between front end and back end engineering work task-wise, that's for engineering to manage. And we're looking for cut lines for product management. So that's, I was just kind of throwing it out there that maybe that's one.
Does everyone agree with that? So there is some breakdown of this that we can make happen? So I
Yeah,
think
that sounds right to me.
Okay, I think the challenge might be in defining the back-end pieces that could happen ahead of time earlier. Right, the front end has been fairly well fleshed out with the designs and are available in this ticket. So I think it would make the most sense then to create a ticket that represents the details of the back-end work to make that happen. So again, we're treading into territories here, so I don't want to, between this and grooming, I want to make sure that we're being respectful of everyone's time because I know we're still executing on the current release, but I'm kind of looking at Lucas as the person who just gave this great explanation of what could happen in advance in the back end. Could you maybe start an issue on that and we can
sure.
take that into grooming for 12.9?
Yeah, absolutely. And if that one needs to go into play and breakdown again, that's fine. But as long as tomorrow we're better than we are today on this.
Well, and I don't want everyone to think, to mistake that I don't think we're expecting to have everything completely groomed coming out of this meeting. It's really just that conversation of, are all the big questions answered? Have we broken these down into as small pieces as we can? And do we understand the boundaries of work? Are we gonna have to be working in, totally different areas of the product that we're used to or new technologies that we're not very familiar with? So I think we've achieved at least the breakdown portion of this question. Are there other questions besides what Lucas has posed for this one, or should we keep moving so we, for the sake of hitting more than one of these issues today? I think the next one is fairly related. All right, I'm going to move on to custom rules for WAF. So Zamir, this one's already been assigned to you somehow. I'm not sure. And it's already been back and weighted. So this is, I'm guessing, one, it's been around for a year. So I'm assuming we've talked this one into the ground at this point. Anyone want to, so let's start. Sam, would you like to summarize to us the intent of this issue?
Yeah, so this one predates me, and obviously it's been around for a year, so I'm not the author, but the idea is just making it easier to configure the WAF. Right now we ship by default with the OWASP policy set, but if customers want to customize that at all, it's a pretty steep learning curve there too. So this would be bringing a UI into that to make it a whole lot easier for them to customize what the WAF does. And I think there are some designs in the design. Oh, no, not on this one, maybe. I know we have some designs floating around out there for this one too.
Yeah, could you take the action, Sam, of making sure that those get clearly linked to here? Because over this year of conversation, I'm not seeing them.
They're attached to the WAF rule management UX related issue.
Yeah, I just saw that. Thanks, Lucas. I think in general, people would like to have less steps to be able to get the information that they need to understand an issue. So in general, we could try and, as conversations get big, clean up would probably be helpful. They're attached to this, you said?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
So I think generally we've been attaching these to the
Going
design tab
to-
on the parent issue after the UX work gets completed.
Yeah, so I'll move those over.
Cool. I guess
So,
that
yeah,
being
I
said,
think
is this,
Becca put near the bottom, there's kind of the final designs, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. So
oops.
yep. This mock might be outdated, but the next two for sure.
You can see where the challenge comes in.
Oh, absolutely. No, so this mock, and then the next mock. So it's kind of a two mock issue. So you can see we've got the OWASP rules that we ship with, and then you can create new custom rule sets. And I need to sync up with Becca. I don't know if this is 100% done or only 90% done. Again, this wasn't originally my issue, but if you guys have questions, let's get those asked now. If it's not ready to change status, that's okay. I can take any action items and incorporate them back into the issue.
All right, let's start with questions. None? Are we asking to configure anything that isn't already configurable? I guess, can someone help me understand sort of the back end, front end of this?
I guess I can because I did grooming on the specification. It's actually well discovered. Lucas did a lot of on the back end of the research process initially. So essentially there is a way to inject a certain annotation into the ingress definition in Kubernetes Nginx ingress. By doing that, we can define a custom security rules, and we already partially using this annotation in our auto deployment process. It's the way how we enable mod security in the first place for the auto deploy Helm charts. So this work actually was reduced to just changing Helm charts to add ability to inject custom mod security roles for the annotation. There was several related tasks. There were several related tasks to that, specifically rules validation and tracking of the statistics. But this was extracted into separate issues because on both ends we have some complications. So this particular issue was just about annotation and ability to add custom rules. No UI involved as far as I understand.
So this might be a bad candidate for this discussion right now because work has already begun on this. Grooming is already completed on this. My big question is, do we have a front-end issue created for this?
No, this is something that we touched while we discussed the previous issue. Because of the change of the direction and orchestration team, certain things, there are two different ways we can deploy certain things like ingress, for example, and the new ways, the way that the orchestration team is pushing as proper direction, which is a Git-based deployment flow called class application. It has some limitations and specifically state control of the applications, and this blocks heavily any kind of UI right now. They're doing work on that end, so they're essentially blocked by them until they will be able to track the state and have some minimal UI support. We will be heavily limited by what we can do, I think.
Okay. Is that information represented anywhere here in this issue, Arthur, like in a comment or? I
In
feel like
discussion, in grooming process, there were a lot of discussion, what back and forth between me and Lucas. I think it should be all covered. And
okay. Okay.
specifically,
Oh, here we go.
yeah, why some issues were extracted out of this one, and why I reduced the scope of this issue to a small one that originally planned.
So the scope of this has been reduced, but it doesn't sound like the issues that would need to be addressed once we're no longer blocked to fulfill the entire vision have been created.
There were created two issues. Front-end issues not, but I had an assumption that UX work was blocked by that, and it stopped, but I just checked the issue. Apparently, UX discovery issue that we just checked, it was successfully completed. So, but I don't know what, because as I understand, UI work is supposed to happen after successful UX work and mocks already. But on that issue, there is comment that they will be tested first, like mocks themselves will be tested. So I don't know if if it's too early to create UI issue or not, but we might, just in case, to highlight that potential down the road, we might want to do a UI work.
Okay, this is an interesting situation. I can work with Sam to get a UI issue created once I have read through the intense amount of discussion that's going on there to make sure that we don't drop that work and that we can keep some track on the blocking. Is this the issue that's blocking it? No. What is the issue exactly? Or is there an issue that is linked here that is what we'd be looking for to know when we're no longer blocked on the UI?
I need to find that one. It was an orchestration team issue. I, to be honest, don't know where they track it, but I will try to.
If you could look, or at the very least, put a comment here that says you weren't able to find it.
Yep.
To look for blocking orchestration. I love it typing when people are watching me. That's my favorite. Issue Lindsay and Sam. Sam, do you mind working with me on that? Because there's a lot of history on this one, and I want to make sure that I'm not just kind of creating a Delta ticket, but that I understand what your end goal is and that we fill the gap there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And in terms of just organizing these two, we talked briefly about this when we were talking about the plank breakdown last week, but we could also look into creating creating an epic, because we don't have sub issues. So if we want to actually promote this to an epic, it might be easier to track.
So the back-end work that Arthur is describing has already been broken off, and we have smaller issues reflecting the back-end work that's been completed and still needs to be done, and you're saying put those under this epic? Or is all of that work that's already happened from the back-end represented here in this issue?
I do not think it's represented here.
Sorry. Most of the work for the back end for this task is done. I think if you go for the minimal description on this task, it's covered. And I think the UI is more like further work or something like that.
Further work? Okay. Sorry, Zamir, I'm not totally following. Can you repeat that?
If you see the proposal, under proposal, there is like minimum, and it's kind of the back end part. And then you have like next. I don't know if next is kind of next issue, and then that would include the wizard with the UI properly. That's what I got from this.
Okay.
So the backend part, the MRs, there's two pending MRs, one documentation and one for one of the modules that we handle. And then the UI part would be the only part left. but it goes against with what Arthur and Lucas said before, that we are tied up with the orchestration teams on that. We cannot just, I'm not sure if we can just go and customize whatever we need to go on that. So it would be further discussed.
I think Zamir is actually right. If you read the issue itself in further details, it said that UX, not the UI work, supposed to be done on this issue in parallel. Like, I think originally this issue was not, it did not even have a front-end label. So I don't think if we even need to extract something. Do we maybe we already have an issue for the front end that's related to this visit-like experience that is mentioned in the next steps?
Sam and I will take the action to look. And we're at the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of all your guys' time, not go over on our first one of these meetings. We will look for the existence of the front end tickets. And if it doesn't exist, we'll create it, and we can talk about that in future planning breakdown meetings. I guess my big question is, do we need an additional issue created for any remaining work that needs to be done off of this going into the future, into 12.9, or do we think this is going to be complete? Is the back-end work already represented here, or do we need any more of a breakdown of that going forward?
Again, I already extracted. There is a comment,
okay.
I think, at the bottom that we have 2 additional issues, one for the validation and second for the stats.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think we need more work on extracting additional pieces.
Okay, so we didn't get to the third issue on our list today. You know, I hope that over time, as we can start to create these issues smaller to begin with, these conversations will go faster. I'll sync up with Sam about how we want to handle the rest of the issues that, or at least the other one that was on this list, and any other ones that we didn't include to talk about for 12.9. And we will reschedule, or we can talk about this next week. I think there's some outstanding questions on how often we should have this meeting. You know, the last thing I want to do is inundate everyone with too many synchronous meetings. So that is still to be determined, and we will get everyone's feedback and discuss it further, but not on this call right now. Sound okay to everyone? I appreciate everyone's time and feedback. I hope this is helpful as people start to look at these issues. The goal is that this discussion just helps everyone be on the same page going forward. All right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.